Hello, everybody. I'm Alan. I hold shift Donofrio.
And I am Austin Visions Neil.
This is the Defuse, your CDL post show, as we'll be talking about everything going on from CDL pairs. Of course, day number 3, but also giving our final thoughts on the event. And then we'll be looking forward to what's going to be going on in CDL New York. A couple of weeks in between then and now, though, as this next weekend is mostly saved just for challengers. The weekend after is 4th of July. So we'll be back in 3 weeks with CDL. But let's get things started here. Let's get this fuse lit as we're starting things off with where the semifinals started, which was New York versus Florida. A battle in which I think a lot of people looking at this Florida squad, Austin, were sitting there saying there shouldn't really be a problem for them to take care of New York. That wasn't necessarily the case. A pretty unlikely game 5, and Florida was actually forced to reverse sweep in this one.
Yeah, I mean, this one caught me by surprise for sure. I had said that Florida Mutineers were going to take this 3-0, 3-1, and then New York came out of the gate swinging with a hot 2-0 lead in towards the series. And I think it was off the back end of this map number 1 that you just saw. And I think Attach had a fantastic start to that map, and it kind of just built up so well for them to be able to play through with it. But it was a surprise for me, absolutely. And then it went in towards the search and destroy. They even looked pretty solid. They almost choked a bit of that Ramaza, but closed it out. But overall, Alan, I think that this New York squad definitely could have had a chance at closing this one out. It just came off the back end of Florida Mutineers, I think, really clutching up. But this is the first time we've also seen the Mutineers really with their backs up against the wall here and have a rough start to a series.
It was a rough start to the series for sure. The Gunrunner was a little bit wonky. Like you mentioned, though, Attach played absolutely lights out throughout that first map. And really, even in the second, he had a lot of good impact and kills, even though he only went 6 and 5 in the search and destroy. It was Mac who kind of led the charge. But the thing about this New York team that kind of gives me a little bit of concern is we had issues before when we talked about Mac when it came to these guys kind of closing out series. The domination's been their weakest point this year. Although that said, when they've added in Mac, their domination has been better, a little bit more 50-50 since the Chicago home series. And even as of recently, through this weekend and the weekend before, they had won 5 dominations in a row until they lost to the Florida Mutineers in that tight one that they had played on Hackney Yard, where again, it really did feel like it was going to be a closeout because for Florida, they didn't have the same kind of performances from Frosty and Pharaoh. Awakening had to go huge, and he did. And Havoc was the player to also kind of come into the mix, a player that we don't talk a lot about when it comes to this Florida Mutineer squad. But it definitely felt a little bit bad because New York, I think their best chance to win this series was to take the first 2 maps and hopefully do some work on the dom. I mean, they were this close to 3-0 in Florida. And I know me and you, when we were watching, we were kind of like, uh-oh, is this really happening? Like, we just got done talking about how Florida was maybe the best team in the game, and they're about to be 3-0'd by New York. But I think that, as you kind of look at this series as a whole, the ability for Florida to come back and get that reverse sweep, I think actually kind of helps their case when it comes to them potentially being the best team in the game, even though they had to reverse and win in game 5.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The fact that we see them go down 0-2 and still bring things back shows you just how deep this roster can really go, and just how much talent individually. Like you just said, Havoc is someone that we don't talk about, and just about all the search and destroys this year, man, he has been pretty lights out. Like I'm surprised he's not talked about more. I think this weekend in particular was really the first time I kind of was like, all right, this man's definitely got it. But I also think Farrell had like the best event like this entire year for himself here. One of them for sure. I thought that he played so consistent, played so well. He was dropping numbers in every single game. And in the respawns in particular, I think he's really grown from when he just got thrown in towards the mix just a couple events in. So this New York squad, they got some work to do. And I mean, that's kind of where the question lies here for us, Alan, is, what do they end up doing? They look better since they've added Mac in towards the mix here. Things have looked a lot more on track, and they've definitely improved, but it just seems to be that struggle point here trying to get past those top teams at the moment.
Yeah, the next step for these guys, I think that, we'll talk about this in the future, but I think both of us have them somewhere in the top 6, if not top 5.
Yeah.
But you take a look at their records versus the teams that are above them. 0-4 versus the Atlanta FaZe, 1-2 versus Chicago, 0-1 versus Dallas, and now having lost to Florida, technically 1-2, but they have not beat Florida. Well, I guess they did beat them once actually at the Florida home series when Mac was still on their roster. So that was a very tight, though. It was a 3-0, but it was a very tight series. What is it going to take for this New York Subliners team to get through that next hurdle? Because it really does feel like they have made improvements across every single mode.
Yeah.
They went a dead even 50-50 in their hard point. They went positive in their domination. They went mostly even. They were down 1 map when it came to the win ratio and their search and destroy. But outside of a couple of bad outings in search, this team has been in the fight every single series that they've played in the last 2 weeks. And the search and destroy was the one area that was easy, I think, for me to say, what is the next step for New York? Get better at search and destroy. They are getting better at search and destroy. The
Hmm.
question mark from here is, what is it going to take from here now for them to get over that next hurdle? And my answer goes to all 5 players have to show up every single map, because you cannot get by on players like Attach, Zuma, and Mac the Carry. How many times have we talked about how accuracy is hot some games, cold some games? Temp is hot some games, cold some games. That, in my mind, is the next thing, is how do you get all 5 players participating at the same level every single game?
I think that's honestly, one of the great points about this entire team. I wish I had like a specific answer on what the next step is. I definitely don't think it's making a roster change whatsoever.
No, no,
Staying
no.
with this solid 5 is absolutely the goal. And whether or not, they look at changing up roles and things like this is something some teams have done throughout the season and then actually found success. I don't know if that will also be something that they look into or not here, but I feel like they have it. They just need to be able to do it. That's the biggest thing, right? Is you have the roster to be able to get there. The consistency has been a little bit wonky and up and down, and I definitely agree. I think it's off the back end of accuracy in particular. When you look at the assault rifles across this game, unfortunately, accuracy is not within that top 5. I don't even know if he would be within that, top 6, top 7 per se. I think that he is kind of on that far end of performing assault rifle players that we have so far within Modern Warfare, and that's the big problem for me. He looked great day number 1, or rather, actually on Saturday, he looked absolutely great on every single match that he had played, and it seemed like the search and destroys were there when he was playing up against Toronto Ultra. I think that was one of his best series actually this entire year, and we did not get that from him, unfortunately, the day after. And you need to get that from him, and until we do, I don't think this New York squad is going to be able to take down these top teams, and they're going to stay on track as they have been here so far.
Beyond that, though, I'm also curious, and I don't think we've actually, between you and I, we've ever actually talked about this. What are your opinions on hard vetoes for certain teams? Because for New York, their hard point hard veto is Azir Cave. For Search and Destroy, their hard veto is Piccadilly. And for Petro, or Domination rather, their hard veto is St. Petro. So it seems strange. I'm personally, when it comes to Domination, if you hard veto a map, I'm actually fine with it, because there's only 2 other maps you have to
Yeah.
work on then. That's fine. But when you've got a 5 map pool for both hardpoint and search and destroy, does that strategy really kind of feasibly seem like an option when you get to the later stages where you're dealing with teams like Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas that are really kind of, they don't really necessarily have a hard set veto. They obviously prefer to veto certain maps over others. Like Atlanta doesn't like to play Ramaza on anything really. For
Yeah.
Chicago, they don't really like to play St. Petro on anything really. But I feel like, when we saw teams like 100 Thieves last year, and even teams like Minnesota at the beginning of this year, when they work on kind of being a full encompassing squad, it gives them the ability to veto out their opponent's strongest
Hmm.
maps. And I feel like that is a better set strategy in a game like this than hard vetoing something that you don't like to play on.
I actually think that's probably the best point to probably bring up for any squad that I think is currently hard vetoing any maps, because I mean, if you're going to be the best in the game, it's either off the back end of all 5 players that are just so talented and are so far ahead than everyone else that you're just simply winning out, just mechanical wise, and your macro just happens to back you up that way, or it's off the back end of, I think, having the adaptation of going in. Listen, we've seen some teams in some series be simply won just off the back end of vetoes. That's just happened. That's a fact. We
Yeah.
almost saw it happen, up against Dallas when they went all the way to a game 5. And there was a lot of vetoes that just played in towards their factor that just didn't look great for them, and that was just like the simple part of it. It's like, if you can throw in those vetoes and throw in those maps that they've been historically good on, and you make them play something else, well, maybe you catch them off guard. So I think that it's absolutely the responsibility of every single team to be playing every single map and not just necessarily hard vetoing something, at least in my personal opinion, because like you said, when you get towards the teams that have been great and have been consistent across every single map in game mode, well, then it just allows them to be so much more flexible within their vetoes. And you see that in a result of a lot of their map wins, just simply because of how those vetoes go down at the start of the series.
Yeah, because like for me, when you take a look at some of the matches that have happened in the recent, history for New York, again, they're hard vetoing things like Azure Cave. Atlanta, they get their gun runner, okay, they get their Petro. They got great maps right there, and that's how they're able to beat New York 3-2 this last weekend. Kind of the same situation when they play up against Chicago. They have to hard veto Azure Cave. Now Chicago gets a chance to go to Ramaza, which they've been putting a lot of time and effort into on hardpoint. It's one of those things that when you're not taking away the best teams' best maps, it really puts you kind of in a disadvantage. And at least that's the way I look at it. I could very well be wrong, but that's kind of my initial
I
take when
agree.
you look at squads like that. And I think it's one of those things that might be the next thing up is, okay, we've got these 5 guys. They're playing at a high level right now. Maybe they're most comfortable on certain maps. We need to start practicing on other things. And I'd be interested to pick Revan's brain to see what he has to say about that as that team kind of moves his way forward. But moving on forward for our own right, the other semifinal, another good one here, another rematch, Atlanta versus Dallas. This was one that, again, I think we expected to go map 5. We weren't disappointed. Mostly the expectation was not because it went 5 the first time, but Atlanta can't seem to get into series that don't go game 5. Where they have to essentially clutch up. And fortunately, they've got a player named Celium who continues to clutch up for their squad
Every time.
time and time again. But this rematch coming through for these guys, not too different than what we saw the first time around when they played at Minnesota. Very much so similar maps that were played, and for the most part, similar results all the way through.
This one was, I really think like on a knife's edge just the entire way through because it almost felt like, or it almost feels like when you play up against FaZe now, it's like, all right, we cannot let them go to a map 5, guys. We got to close out 3-0, 3-1. And that's just almost impossible to do up against their squad because of how dominant they've been so far in toward the year. But I think that, Dallas was on track to maybe, being able to close things out. Like you go back to this map that you're seeing on your screen right now, and they looked great in this one. I think it came off the back end of just really strong rotation, strong holds. Atlanta FaZe could not get into that groove, and they have not been, that strong in towards hardpoint as of late. And that's still showing here for us, at the moment, Alan, across a lot of their series this weekend, as well as the past weekend at the Minnesota homestand. So things that have been not great for them. But I think that Dallas, could very likely have taken this one. It just seems like Atlanta FaZe are so comfortable in game 5s that when they get there, you just pretty much assume that they're going to take it every single time. They've been there, like it's almost sickening the amount of times they've been to a game 5 and have won, and not just game 5s, but game 5s in round 11s. I mean, like that
10
is
plus
just,
at least, right?
The ice is insane. Like it's literally insane. And if they get there, you can just absolutely bet on that they're likely going to win it, and most chances they will. So I think it's a tough series there for Dallas. I still think they have a little bit of work to do, but I do still think that when they get towards the end of the year, Dallas will still be one of the top teams, if not the best team that comes out of champs. It just seems like they need to get there, and they need to make sure that Shotzi is firing on all cylinders, which he was not again this weekend, it felt like.
Yeah, for me, it seems strange because it really is starting to feel like for Dallas, this is their kryptonite, is Atlanta. I mean, they're 1-4 versus this squad, 7-13 in maps overall. I mean, it's just like,
Tough.
what is it going to be? The biggest thing is the search of the domination. The only time Dallas has beat Atlanta is when they win the domination. They're 1-4 versus this squad in domination. They're 2-5 versus this squad in search and destroy, and they're dead even in hard points. But at the same rate, is there maybe some cause for concern for Dallas because they're now also 1-3 versus Chicago and they're 1-2 versus Florida? Is this team actually a top 3 squad? I mean,
yes,
they only have 3 collective wins versus other teams that are in the top 4. And outside of them beating New York a single time recently, they have not been able to perform all that well versus teams that I think, as this next power rankings comes through, that are rated above them, specifically with teams like Florida and Atlanta. But there's some question mark here about Chicago as well. The only thing being that the last time they played Chicago, it was a very convincing 3-0. So maybe some history is starting to rewrite itself there. But I feel like I'm maybe a little bit concerned that as I'm now thinking about this off the top of my head, it might not just be Atlanta that's the kryptonite for this Dallas team. It might very well be the other top 3 teams that are out there.
It's possible. I mean, at the end of the day, Alan, I kind of just still think that having this format, or rather having this roster that's put together with veteranship and rookies that come in towards the year, I still think that this is the very best formula that you could possibly have within Call of Duty. And
I agree.
And it's still, it's still Clayster and Crimsix at the simple fact as the veterans that are on the squad. So I think when things get towards the end of the year, I think that Dallas is going to be back on top, and I think that they're actually going to take champs. And I'm going to tell you why, because last year when E United had went through a bit of a slump when they were playing with their 5 and they had Simp and Abizi and everyone was hyping them up because Simp was playing at a totally different level last year when he had some of his debuts. And I feel like when they got towards the end of the year, everything came together for them and they were unstoppable. And I think that's the same thing that's going to happen this year. And I think that the X factor for this entire squad that just, somehow always manages to go under the radar is Hook. I think that Hook has been, a player that has finally been able to get himself some of those chips that he has not been able to get for a very, very long time. And I think that he has actually been pretty much the most consistent player here throughout event to event to event to event. And now when we get towards the end of the year, I think Dallas is going to come together. When you come to champs, you get Clayster at champs, and it's a totally different player than what you see typically at the remaining events. Same thing with Crim6. I think he had a lackluster champs last year, but every single time he's been at champs in any previous events beforehand in other titles and other games, he's been good. So I think they come together, Alan. It's a long shot. There's a lot of great teams in the game right now, and just about every single team, has a chance at making a good run. But I still have faith in this Dallas squad.
Well, I'm going to agree and disagree with you. I'm going to agree in the fact that Hugh has been the glue for this squad, as he's played the most consistent, I would say, just about out of everybody. But Hugh has not showcased his ability to take over a map in this game yet. I can't think of a specific instance at all throughout the year where Dallas won a map because Hugh popped off. It's Dallas winning maps because Shotzzy pops off. It's Dallas winning maps because Illy pops off. And when they lose respawn maps in specific, which is, again, their biggest trouble versus teams like Florida and Chicago, it's because players like Illy and Shotzzy are going heavily negative. That's the one thing that is the risk and reward, I feel like, when it comes down to this team, is you're going off of young talent that has a lot of pop-off potential. Maybe they're superstars. Maybe one of them are rookie of the year this upcoming year. Maybe you can even argue that one of them could be MVP caliber this year. But you take a look at when they lost on the respawns versus Atlanta, Shotzzy got smoked. He went 13-21 in the first. On the domination, he went 17-21, not the worst case, but Illy goes 12-20. These are not stat lines that you like to see from your SMG line versus an Atlanta team, fairly put, is also not playing at a very consistent level up front. We outside of Abizi this weekend, we had big question marks about if Simp was going to play at that high level. Can Priestess still hang, playing at that kind of speed? What Abizi has showcased with Simp in the past. And Abizi was the player to kind of help Atlanta get past this Dallas team, especially in the respawns, and especially on the first respawn in specific, where he really had a lot of key rotations that came through and a ton of hill time to combine. But my thing is that this Dallas team's not going to win a championship if Illy and Shotzzy, again, are showing hot and cold and Huke is just sitting, at a consistent level. Someone's got to be able to pop off and take over if Illy and Shotzzy are not having good games, in my mind.
Yeah, I think it comes on the back end of like Hook also, having to play the support role in this game as well, which is something that I don't think is talked about too much. He's running the trophy for his squad. He's usually the one that's soaking up the majority of the time and throwing his body on towards the hill. And he definitely relies on someone like Shotzzy to probably go off and have those games. But I think that's the biggest thing. I think Clayster talked about that. It's like the fact that, Hook is still putting up the numbers that he is in playing the role that he is, which is not an easy role to play in Modern Warfare, I think, for sure. I think that's the main reason. But you do bring up some excellent points. Listen, Dallas has definitely struggled here the last couple of events to be able to find their breakthroughs against the top teams, kind of the same page as New York here at the moment. So there's definitely work that has to be done, and I still have the faith that this squad is going to be able to kind of fix up some of their mistakes. And on top of that, they have Rambo now, who's just come in, and I think that it's only going to gradually get better. Rambo's getting comfortable here with the entire chemistry of the team and everything that's going around with the organization as a whole, getting back in towards the Call of Duty competitive side of things. So I think that with a little bit of time, they will get back there. There's been some frustration shown from Clayster on Twitter with everything being online, but it is what it is. You simply have to be able to perform here, and I do think that it's gonna be there. I think they just need a little bit more time here to figure things out and get things back together.
Not a lot of time left, though. That's kind of the big thing in my mind, is that there's not a lot of time left.
Couple more events.
The good news here, and I'll kind of go to the opposite side of the coin, their domination has been incredible over the last 3 weeks, especially. They've only lost 2 dominations. So, I mean, that's super positive. And if you could go back to try to get to your winning ways when you were kind of on that upsurge with Hardpoint and Search, there is potential. But again, my big concern is against the top teams that are out there. They're struggling pretty heavily, especially in the Hardpoint, with the exception of when they face up against Atlanta, where the real concern is the domination. It's again, if you can continue to be 50-50 in your Hardpoints and your searches, and you can continue to be good in your domination, that leads to W's. I mean, if you could keep winning that map 3 and you keep winning your Hardpoint pick and your search pick, you should be good to go. It just comes down to that's not been the case in one way or another versus these top teams. And there is a little bit of concern there. But of course, with Atlanta taking that map 5, clutching things up, they do get a finals rematch versus Florida. I know we were excited to see, could Florida pull it off, get the back-to-back, I think in a lot of people's minds, if they do it, they're definitively the best team in the game. There's really no way you could argue it at that point. It's just, yep, it's stamped. Everyone's going to go ahead and sell it. And, well, they sold it, if I'm not lying. A very convincing 3-0 sweep all the way through this one. It was a tight first 2 maps, to be fair. Florida had to pull a little bit of a comeback on the gun runner for the first hard point, then the round 11 on search, which honestly I was surprised they got to round 11 in the first place. But then we got a record-setting domination as 235 points. We haven't seen numbers like that since the flag change and the time change in the halves for domination. 235 to 70. Absolutely dominating. And this is now the first time that the Atlanta FaZe has been 3-0'd on the year.
That's right. And I think this one was even more surprised than New York, you know, being able to take a couple of maps off of Florida, because everybody has Atlanta FaZe as, you know, if not the best team here coming in towards this event, the second best team or third best, whatever you have them, they're definitely one of the top teams. So the fact that they lost like that was just insane. And I still think that it's off the back end of Florida having Awakening that's just joined in towards the roster. They're still in this honeymoon phase. They're still in this phase of everybody is, you know, meshing with each other, you know, getting to know each other, even, you know, just having Awakening in for not that long whatsoever. But it just seems like everything is clicking with this squad. And when you look at it, like there's no one on this squad that, you know, has like, you know, an insane following or has an insane personal brand themselves. So I feel like there's not really an ego issue here across these guys. They're like very genuine people who are just looking to win, and winning is exactly what they're doing. I think, you know, what they did deciding to bring in the young gun here was one of the best decisions I think that's been made throughout the entire CDL this year on making a roster swap. Maybe with the addition of bringing someone in like Mac to New York. But I still think that this is just an insane squad that, like, I don't even really have much to say. Like, I mean, everything was said like in that map number 3. Losing the way that you did in map number 3 was just insane for the Atlanta FaZe fans. And we got to see 2 crazy like score lines that happened, you know, with Optic Gaming in Toronto in the Hackney Yard, and then going forward into towards a Hackney Yard domination, which is, you just think like in a lot of ways like Atlanta FaZe would be able to fight them for sure on a map like this. Like they just have all the players that are able to make the right plays and the right decisions to be able to do it. But the first minute and a half, I believe, is when they flipped Atlanta FaZe out of the A flag, got the favorable side, and from there everything just well, everything was just unfortunately a shut door, and there was nothing Atlanta FaZe could really do to come back.
I was kind of perusing through some of the notes to see, you know, what has been the greatest differential in domination, and nothing else even comes close. Even in the old format of how domination was set up, no one even got close to 235 points.
Wild.
I mean, this game was over at the 3-minute mark,
yeah,
mathematically in the second half. And the thing about it, when they played Dallas on Saturday, they lost that map barely 2 points. They lost that map. But the way that Florida was playing Hackney Yard Dom this weekend was showcasing that they have not just been winning this map, they're finding ways to push the envelope of what can we get away with. That is, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we would have said this is some of the greediest domination play we've ever seen in the CDL this year. Without question, some of the plays they were trying to make were extremely greedy. But they have found a way to push that envelope and still have a way to control the tempo and control the map. The A strategy they have set up, where they immediately, off of their A flag start, they send one to go neutralize and maybe even cap the C flag, one to anchor A. You're essentially saying, we're going to 3v5 in the warehouse to hold the B flag. And they win it. It's just the times that they go for dominations and full caps is just like, you should not be able to get away with this. And they are. And it's not just the fact that they're getting away with it, like they're stealing it. They are doing it in a way that is, it literally, when we were watching it, my mouth was just dropped the entire time. I was like, they're going to go for another cap and they're going to get this. Like, they're just reading everything so gosh darn well. And that's super impressive for a squad since they've entered in, adding Awakening. They've only lost a total of 5 respawn maps. They've lost 3 hard points. They've lost 2 dominations. And in those losses, they've mostly been tight games with a couple of exceptions. And the only real major exception was the 129 to 161 Dom lost to Dallas at Minnesota when they played on Gunrunner, a map that they're not very good at. But that's insane to me. The fact that you just insert in a guy, he fits the role perfectly that you need, and you're finding this much success. It's going to be hard to argue that these guys are not just the number one team in the game right now, but the favorites to potentially win it all, based on the fact that they've shown very little weaknesses at all throughout any of their map mode combos.
Man, and Atlanta Face says, like you said, has never experienced anything like this. So this is a big wake-up call for them, I think, on top of it all, right? Like they're going to most certainly go back towards the lab, and Replays is gonna, go through all of that with them. But yeah, they do show a lot of teams how you can play Hackney Yard. And I mean, as much as I've thrown the term around Hackney Yard, I think that's the best Hackney Yard that I've ever seen so far, in this entire year. It was fantastic. And I think the biggest thing was like you said, it was the anchoring of the spawns and realizing like they need to keep one player in towards the middle of the map that needs to stay alive and play on that wall, or playing towards top useless to make sure spawns don't flip out. And it just allowed them to constantly just apply pressure. And FaZe just, hit a point where like they did not know what to do. Like they were just rushing 5 right in towards the warehouse a lot of the time to try and get themselves a B flag. And every single time they try to rotate back out, that's when Florida immediately puts their resources in towards the middle of the map, sends them back into warehouse. They just win, trade out gunfights, and they just retake control. Then they loop someone right back around that green side when Atlanta is focused on taking the warehouse back on the unfavored side. Insane. The shot calling was phenomenal. Even going on with the listen-ins a couple of times, they're listening to the Mutineers. Like their comms were crisp, they were clean. Like there was no like hesitation. I think that's like a real big factor for me, because like there's no like real big leader per se that like just instantly comes to mind for as far as who's going to be making those calls. But it's everybody. It's everybody that contributes to making calls. Hey guys, we need to back up B. Hey guys, we need to send one back to make sure that we're anchoring spawns here. We're a little bit too far pushed forward. Like these little things that everybody has the ability to be able to input and throw in. It's just really it's something to celebrate, honestly, with a squad that has not had an insane big names put in towards a roster, but have simply just been put together to win, and they're doing a great job at that.
I'm wondering as well how much impact Ricky has had on this team as the coach of the Florida Mutineers. I feel like he's a coach that nobody really talks about, and he's done a very good job this year. Maybe there's some consideration for Tom too, Ogre too, to potentially be that guy that's kind of looking over the amateur scene saying, this is the guy we need. Because the moves they have made, yes, have been flawless. They've been perfect. But beyond that, the adjustments that we've seen this team make have been incredible. I mean, again, before Awakening got to the mix, their Hackney Yard domination was atrocious, was awful. They had lost like their last 3 straight when they had played Hackney Yard. They had an Awakening, and now they're 3-1 on the map since they got him into the mix, and 235-70 is one of those. It's one of those things that you wonder how much of that coaching is really kind of applied to this squad in specific. But I think there's also some consideration, like you mentioned, there's not a lot of egos. It's a lot of this, again, up-and-coming players, if you want to call them that, or players that have been good but maybe overshadowed by, again, those quote-unquote superstars that we've mentioned in the past. And maybe there is a little bit of a humbling experience to be kind of built between these 5 members in specific to kind of get them to this point to where, yeah, they very much so are realizing that the only way we do this is if we do this together. And so far, that's paid out pretty nicely for them. But stepping away from team chemistry stuff, we'll be talking about MVP talks. But before we get there, this is probably about the time that I imagine a lot of you guys might have some questions for us as we kind of not only turn away from the results and turn forward to some more foreshadowing type of things, but you can submit questions right now for a chance at 5 CMG credits just by going to the Twitter post that was put up. ! Questions will get you a link to that Twitter post. Put your question in, and if we answer your question, you'll get 5 credits. Pretty easy, pretty simple. About the easiest way you can earn credits in the world. So make sure you stop over and you guys do that if you're interested in kind of potentially earning free credits. And of course, if you want to see our thoughts on certain things. But MVP talks I want to talk about next. There's been a lot of conversation as far as who the MVP of the league is at this current moment, in this current juncture. There's been conversations for Skies, for Celium, players like Shotzi, for Envoy, for Octane. What are your kind of takes as far as in this current moment, who's kind of the most valuable player in your mind at the moment in the CDL?
And there's a lot to come to mind, Alan.
I know.
If there was one, honestly, I think it's Celium for me. Like, all right, so like you have to kind of figure out, where you put the most value into, kind of remarking somebody as being the most valuable player so far in towards the game. I put it a lot on, how they respond to having to go big in clutch certain situations. And for me, Celium, like it's insane to drop like a good 10 or 11 kills like in map number 5s, let alone. But this man's been putting up like 16s, 18s, like just like insane numbers that you would expect Celium to be dropping like the CDL playlist. But no, he's doing it against like other professional teams. Like it's absurd. For me, I really think it's Celium. I think that he is the best player in the game still. He's been still so solid within the respawns. I think he has a great understanding of what lanes he has to cover and what spots he needs to pick up as soon as his teammates are going down before it's even communicated. Like I think that's just like instant towards him, and I really do think he's going to be a player that goes down as someone that's really going to make a big mark here within Call of Duty in the history books. And this is only his second year. This is his second year, man, and the kid's been
Yeah,
doing so talented. He's been so talented. I think that's it for me at the moment here, Alan. But there is a lot of people that you could really throw in, I think, as the best player in the game at the moment. But I give it to those game 5s. I give it to those round 11s, those crazy performances that he's been able to do here so many times so far in towards the year.
For me, it's the definition most valuable player. It's not the best player. It's the one that brings the most value to the team. And I agree with you. Celium has been one of the, if not only, reasons that Atlanta has survived as long as they've had in these game 5s over the last couple of weeks. He dropped nearly 20 against the Toronto Ultra to clutch up round 11. He was able to clutch up against Dallas with almost 15 kills. I mean, it's insane. The guy's absolutely a monster. And the work that he does, even throughout the rest of the respawn, wins them major moments. I think that when it comes down to how Atlanta's been able to stay up top so far, it is players like Celium. But at the other side, I want to spend some time to talk about Skies because he's probably the best AR in the game right now. And if I swear to God, if I see him tweet another post saying, all I do is block spawns and watch long routes, guy's an idiot. He's incredible. He does a lot more than that. I mean, I love that he gives his team credit, to be sure, but he does a lot more than just that. And some of the moments that he's had, and even in that finals, that again, against Atlanta in that search and destroy, yeah, he only went 8 and 7, but he found a couple of huge kills to make sure that they won that Piccadilly in total, and was able to shut down a player like Celium throughout really the entirety of that set, including also Major Maniac, who's also a good AR in his own right. I think there is some consideration that if Florida continues on this trend, it would be very plausible to throw Skies at the top of the list because, again, if you're beating this Atlanta FaZe squad over and over again, where Celium doesn't have the chance to have value, then you would argue that Celium's not the most valuable player, right? And that's kind of the thing that I also have like with players like Octane. Like, is Octane the best AR in the game? Maybe, but he plays for Seattle, so it's kind of hard to tell, right? It's very difficult to make that argument when you're watching a team kind of suffer around him. And maybe there is the argument that he has kind of like a Russell Westbrook with OKC, where he is the only reason why Seattle is winning. So again, when it comes down to who's the most valuable player, maybe it is someone like Octane. I just think it's very difficult with this community and this environment in this game in esports where you can sit there and say that a team that's at the bottom of the rankings has the most valuable player.
It is hard. I mean, I love that you bring up Skies because for whatever reason, it seems like he's still not talked about a lot. Kind of like a Havoc, if you will, I guess, on this roster too, where I think that Awakening comes in and overshines a lot of everybody else because he's new and he's putting up the performances that he is. But I think it's actually the ability. Like I was like watching Skies, I was like, listen now, I'm like, why is Skies as good as he is? Like how is he dropping, the numbers that he is? Yes, he locks down lanes and he does all those things he talks about, but his ability to win assault rifle gunfights up close, like, I don't know how many people like really realize this, but like I was going back and watching just like that Gunrunner just up against FaZe there in the grand final. It's like he finds kills that he just shouldn't, man. Like it is insane the amount of times that he's actually finding the heads of players up close. And I think that that's something that is just something that's not talked about whatsoever. Like Skies has been so talented. He's been so good this year. And he has one of the best, shots within the game, I think, for sure. And he has one of the best KDs. Like he's always putting up like insane like KDs in towards all of his games. And not that it's all on that, but when someone's dropping 30-40 kills on average on your respawns, like it's going to do a lot for you on the map. I mean, it just simply is. That's just how it works. So it's been incredible to be able to watch him, but there is certainly a lot of players I think that still are up for talks. And while we still have a couple more events at the end of the day, and we'll still see if these players are going to be able to keep that up heading in towards champs, where, of course, where the most talk is really going to start to play out here for us. But Celium, absolutely, I think up towards this point, he's been lights out, and he's been the player that you just simply can't ignore for sure.
Now, I want to go back to Chicago here and talk about Envoy because he was in the running for MVP last year in a lot of people's
Yeah,
minds. And actually, it
Unhendi, yeah.
misses out on Rookie of the Year as well throughout that year. But um, he's been, I think, one of the biggest reasons why Chicago is as dominant as they are in Hardpoint, which is by far their best mode. I think at this point now, I haven't had a chance to look at the differentials, but I want to say that ranking wise, based on win percentage and map differential on average, Chicago is now by far the best Hardpoint team in the game. And a lot of it is in the back end of Envoy, again, kind of being that nitty gritty objective player, but also, again, he does it in a way that allows Chicago a lot of free time to do everything else on the map. He wins so many gunfights up close and personal. My thing is, and I guess my question to kind of propose here is, what is it going to take for Envoy to get into that ranking of your Celiums and your Skies and your Octanes right now? Because it still feels like when you look at who are the top candidates, he's still sitting right around number 4, number 3, depending on how you have Octane kind of situated.
Yeah, I feel like in order for Envoy to get back into that top kind of caliber of the best players in towards this game, it's going to take, I think, just individual strong performances, I think, just to put it, simply. But I think, like, when you look at like why Envoy was the tox that he was, it's because he was doing the things that like the average viewer wouldn't notice. Like
Yeah,
he was doing,
absolutely.
right,
So
like he
agreed.
was making like the deep plays, sitting in the back of the spawn, just playing his life and then getting spawns for a squad. Or he was making just like the right calls, like as soon as he spawns, he understands where to go on the map without anyone telling him or without even saying it. He just knows. And I think that's what kind of put him in the running of being a great player. And on top of it, yeah, he's been able to win some insane gunfights on a lot of those rotations within Hardpoint. So in order for him to do it, I think he just needs to come in towards this next event and really just have like an individual strong performance, like put up some big numbers, make those big same plays that he was making earlier on, find those big routes that was able to influence spawns in towards their favor. And I mean, I don't know if he'll necessarily be able to do it just because of some of the hype around some of the other individuals that have now been able to kind of, I guess, close the gap a bit and maybe kind of go ahead of him per se. But if Envoy has like just a lights out event, the next one they come into, and Huntsmen are able to make a deep run, I think, towards like the grand finals or something like this, then I guarantee Envoy will be right back in towards the talks for sure.
And the other thing is we still have not seen Chicago play Atlanta yet. So there's some
Will we?
comparison and
Will we?
contrast. They're not scheduled to be in the same group or scheduled matchup at all throughout the rest of the year. So they would have to do it in playoffs somewhere
Right.
down the road, which we know how elusive those could be at times. Before we swap up, though, I want to talk one more point. If Florida and Awakening continue to have performances like they've had in the last 2 weeks, can Awakening not just win Rookie of the Year? Could he potentially be MVP as well?
Oh, can he? Oh man, that would be
He is
insane.
he has been lights out the
He
last 2
has been
weekends
great, Alan.
against the best teams in the game. I know he joined late, quote unquote, but when it talks
Yeah,
about, again, most valuable player, Florida has lost 5 respawns since he joined. If they win a championship and if they win another event, I think they've got what, 1, maybe 2 left. If they win the rest of their events out and win finals, I think he has to be in the conversation with Skies for MVP and definitively Rookie of the Year, because that change to take a team that's been sitting again after they lose, Prestini, they kind of fall down the ranks a little bit. They have an
right.
0-6 weekend. Now they're winning everything. I'm sorry, if he continues to play at this level and Florida win it all, even if they don't win every single event from here on out, if they win it all, they win the playoffs, and Awakening has an incredible playoffs, I think he has to be Rookie of the Year and a top 2 candidate with Skies for MVP of the league.
All right, if he does everything that you just said he does, then absolutely. If he can go on to win the next event and just chain all of the event wins for every single one from here on out, then yeah, for sure. I think absolutely. But
Okay.
I mean, it is kind of hard, right? Because he's only played 2 events. He's been great. I'm not taking anything away from Awakening, but we haven't seen him play, through a couple of the, the minor little metas. We haven't seen him play, on LAN yet either. And I mean, as much as this league has obviously still been going on with everything that's happening around the world, you're doing with what you will or doing with what you can. So I mean, at the end of the day, I think that he could. I think it's possible, but I think it's hard just because we've only seen him for 2 events and we're only going to see him for like the last part of the year. And there's been players that have been consistent through the entire way through.
Has there though?
I mean, for
Outside of Skies
MVP,
and Celium?
MVP,
Outside of Skies and Celium.
come on,
Rookie of the
maybe
let's
not
say
out of
rookie of
those
the year.
two, but those are the
Rookie
two
of
that
the
I'm
year.
thinking of. Oh, for rookie of the
Rookie of the
year, I mean, it's really just like Shotzi was there for me, but yeah, I mean, Awakening with the last two
But
events, I
I
think his
mean,
hype overtakes Shotzi for sure.
I think so too, because Shotzi, he came in with a lot of hype,
He
did
did.
not perform, started to perform, has leveled off, and even the last couple have not really performed all that well.
Sure.
Let's just frame up. Here's what Florida would have to do. They play at London. They start off playing OGLA 3-0. Then they've got London and Seattle in that group. They get out of that winner's bracket, no problem. On the other side, you've got New York, Dallas. That's it, really. LAG and Paris. So there's potential that Florida win that, pending they could beat New York again. They could beat Dallas again. Then I think they also play at Toronto. Yeah, they sure do. Their opening matchup is versus Dallas, but they're in the same group as Atlanta and Chicago's at that event as well. So that would be the one. That would be the one that I would be looking at, that Toronto finishing weekend before playoffs. If Florida could continue to beat the top teams and Awakening could continue to be playing at that level, I think that he has to be a major consideration for the top rookie of the year. But
Major consideration for sure. Absolutely. I think that it's definitely within the talks, but like the big question is right now, like, is Awakening going to be able to keep doing what he's doing? Like we've had some
he's
people
got
that
no signs of slowing
no,
down.
I know, Alan. I know I'm not taking anything away from him whatsoever. But we've had also, someone like Shotzi who looked great and then, or sorry, started off bad, looked great, seemed like he was on track to keep it rolling, but then slowly came down. So I'm wondering if after this honeymoon phase, that I still think that they're most certainly in right now, right? Like, it's not been that long that they've been teaming. They found instant success. So what happens if one thing goes wrong? When they lose a series, does everything just come
When
tumbling
they
down?
lose a series, yeah.
Like, or if they lose a series, maybe they don't. I don't know, but it's like those questions I think you have to throw in. I think that there's a lot of people on the Florida hype train right now, and I am sold that they are on the best team in the game. But it's still, a little bit of time left before we get towards playoff, before we see the big grand finals of the entire year, to see exactly how everyone's going to place and how everyone's going to match up. So I think there's still a couple of the questions to be thrown in, because he is a rookie. He is going to have a little bit more pressure as we get deeper and deeper in towards the year. And whether or not he's going to be able to perform, I think he will be able to, but we don't know what's going to happen. So I still think there's a lot of question marks at the moment.
I will say, as much as it's going to sound weird to say, this Florida team needs to lose to see how they handle it, because there's no way they go flawless the rest of the year. But it is important to note that before Awakening, this team was 9-8. They're now 17-8. That's incredible. So let's jump forward and talk power rankings. I think we know who we have up top. And maybe it would be best to go top to bottom instead of bottom to top here, because I think we kind of know what our top 5 looks like. And then conversation for what happens below that, I think, is going to be a little bit hairier. So I think at this point, everyone can agree Florida's probably the number 1 team of the game. Sure. I won't even say probably. Florida's the number 1 team of the game. Is Atlanta your number 2 still, as they finish second this weekend? Or are you a little bit more concerned and maybe you drop them lower than that? Because in my mind, they still say number 2.
They say number 2. I don't think they dropped down. Like, they looked good in just about every series. Maybe I shouldn't say good, but they looked decent in every single series except for finals. So I still have them at number 2. Absolutely. I still think they're the second best team in the game.
Now the next question, Dallas, Chicago. Have not seen them play since the Chicago home series that Dallas did smoke Chicago in. But the head-to-head is not favorable for that argument for Dallas, as they're 1-3 versus Chicago. I imagine that that's going to be one of the 2 of those in your mind for 3-4, Dallas-Chicago.
For sure. Agreed.
It just comes down to what order. Personally, I think Dallas still has to retain the 3rd spot, even though they did have a little bit of shaky moments versus London in their outcoming. And then, of course, obviously losing the map 5 versus an Atlanta squad, in which they got smoked on Azir Cave. I don't even know why they still play that map. They're 0-6 on it, and they have not really looked good in the last couple of weeks. Do you still think Dallas deserves the number 3 spot over Chicago, or do you think there could be a possible flip up there?
I think there's a possible flip up. I mean, I don't think Dallas showed me anything like, oh wow, like the squad, like, all right, they've improved here. Like, oh wow, like this is looking a lot better. Like, it seems like they're still kind of like right there, and there's nothing really that's kind of just improved insanely from them. So I still think that like they're a top team for sure. But I think I personally move Chicago up just purely because they've looked so good in hardpoint in particular. I think they have like a 70% win rate in hardpoint.
Yeah,
and I mean, if you're winning the majority of your hardpoints in a best of 5 series, like, you're going to end up coming out with a lot of those best of 5 series in your favor. So I think that I moved down Dallas 1, but I still have faith in them to be able to kind of bring things back as they move into that 4th spot.
You got New York 5 then, I assume?
I think after this weekend, yeah, Alan, they looked good up against Florida. They're the team that's actually pushed Florida to the limits the most, I think, so far, and really forced them to kind of pull out a massive win and pull off the reverse sweep. So yeah, I've New York at 5th.
Yeah, I've got them there as well. And then from there, it's kind of a hodgepodge. I had Optic
Yeah.
really high, but after this last weekend, it
Oof.
seems like this is just going to be the Hindenburg of teams right now. As they get off the ground a little bit, adding Chino, and now it looks like everything is completely imploded. Um, I guess the follow up question, because I think we could probably talk all day about what happens from 6 until probably about 10.
Sure.
But do you think that Optic falls out of goes? Well, I guess. Do you think Optic falls into the bottom 4 after this last weekend? Because in my mind, I think they absolutely do.
Yes, they do. I mean, listen, like that performance this weekend, unacceptable, I think, for this roster. And I think they feel the same way too. And like there's frustration. The practice is not there. This roster that you see should be performing better than they are, but they're
Yeah,
simply not.
absolutely.
So yeah, they dropped down, I think, to the 8th spot here and dropped down a couple pegs for sure for me.
Then the only other two that I want to hit on here, Paris Legion and Toronto Ultra, because the Toronto Ultra had a great weekend this last
They
weekend.
did.
We talked about it a lot on Saturday that this roster of 5 is probably going to be the set 5 for the rest of the year.
Sure.
They've obviously showcased that they can put in some work. They're able to take Atlanta to game 5. They blow past Optic Gaming, and they play a very good series versus the New York Subliners in 4.
Mm-hmm.
Is this team a top 8 team? I would say it's probably easy to say. And my question is, do you think they have the potential to be a top 6 team by the end of the year?
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
And it's not just because I'm from Toronto. It's because it's because I do.
Sure.
It's because I do think they're looking great, man. Like I think that Kleenex was the missing piece to the puzzle for the lineup that they are going with, right? With the 4 between Bant, who looked a lot better in respawn this weekend around, and that was a big selling point for me on this roster. So seeing them be able to do that at least made me a lot more confident. Metal's back in, had some rough games, but overall did go big in some of those search and destroys, trying to help Bant out, who has been one of the main carries. So I think that they have the ability to upset a lot of teams. For me, I think they're going to be that dark horse team going in towards champs, and I think they're only going to get better and better and better over these next couple of weeks and coming months. I guess there's 6 weeks left, if I'm not mistaken. I think left in towards the year. So I mean, over these next 6 weeks, I think with the addition towards Kleenex, who had some big pop-off moments, he showed, listen, this is the reason I'm supposed to be in this starting lineup. This is why you guys brought me on, Toronto Ultra. Like, play me, put me in. And well, he proves himself, and I think that they absolutely will get there for sure.
Last thing, is the Paris Legion the worst team in the league?
Yeah. I mean, you're at your own homestand, right? You're at your own homestand, and didn't happen. Yeah, you don't got your fans behind you. Dude, okay, but like Alan, if you were on one of these rosters and you were going to your homestand, like just imagine going 0-2. Like for me, that would be even more heartbreaking than losing the series itself. Like you gave your fans nothing to really root for, and I mean that sucks in its own. So the fact that they couldn't get even a series win at their own homestand, I think is a little bit sad. And yeah, they're the worst team. I don't think there's anything else that like, I mean, LA looks better, right? Ever since
LA looked better last weekend.
They looked a lot better. So I mean, I think yeah, they're the worst. I don't see else who you could really contend with them.
I mean, maybe there's conversation for Seattle, but even still, with Proto in the mix, Seattle actually did look a little bit more improved. It wasn't a great improvement, wasn't an astronomical improvement, but there was improvement there. But
sure,
the thing at the end of the day for me is Paris Legion are 1-9 since things have gone online. And the only win was against the Seattle Surge, and that was the first game that they played online. So I mean, it's tough, man. It's really rough out there. I mean, it's not even just the fact that they're losing series. It's in the way that they're losing them. How many times have we seen this team go up 5-0, 5-1, 5-2 and search and destroy and still lose?
Yeah, they almost did it again, right?
Almost did it again. I mean, some of their losses since things have been online, a 4-6 loss, 5-6 loss, 5-6 loss, two more 4-6 losses. And their wins have all been round 11 wins, with one exception being a 6-1 win versus the Seattle Surge. That's not good. That's not good at all. The fact that you're losing leads and you're only winning around 11s is not good. Interesting. I think I'm right there with you though when it comes to Paris being the worst team in the game right now. They need some major improvements, and I think we talked about this the other day that it would be cool to see Brezzy stop up and play, but I just don't. That's gonna happen, unfortunately, with the current world climate that we live in. Let's talk New York. It's going to be a couple of weeks But here are your groupings for you guys. This will be fun. Speaking of Paris and Toronto, they play each other first in Group A. Also in Group A, Atlanta will play up against the Los Angeles Guerrillas. That's going to be an interesting one because the last time these two played, Atlanta, again, as they had in every single win they've had lately, they've had to do it in Game 5. Early predictions, who do you got getting out of that group?
Coming out of that group, I think I got to pull up the actual roster here for me just so I can see all the teams actually here. Just give me a quick moment on, because I want to be able to actually see them here so I can go through them all. Because I think without a doubt, I think Toronto takes their win against Paris. I mean,
agreed.
Probably 3-0, 3-1, unless Toronto just completely, plunders and goes under here for themselves. Then I don't think that's a situation that they're able to do that. But yeah, I think that's, for a couple of big wins, I think that Toronto might be able to go the distance. And I think this is their chance to do it, right? If Toronto do take the win here, both against both of the teams that they're up against, then I think that there's a chance for them to be able to, not only prove themselves, but also kind of work in some of that practice behind the scenes with Phoenix. So I think I'll have them for one. And then for the other group, which I'm trying to pull up here.
Other groups lineup, we got London playing up against Chicago, and then New York plays up against Minnesota for Group B.
Ooh, and Minnesota's been on a little bit of a stagnant decline.
I
think Chicago.
Great.
I think Chicago comes out for sure. It'll be close though. I think it'll be New York and Chicago. And then I think that overall, I think the hard points will carry Chicago through. I also think that they're really hungry to come back with Pristini. And I think Pristini in particular wants to try and prove himself. Listen, I didn't have the best performance last event, but I'm going to show you guys that I'm still on top and I deserve to be on this roster. So I have faith in him.
So for me, Group A, I've got Toronto getting through, playing Atlanta in the winner's bracket. Atlanta gets past Toronto, but Toronto wins out of the loser's bracket. I don't think LAG can play at the same speed and the same tempo that we just saw from Toronto. That's fair. Group B, I agree with you. Chicago's hard points will get them through that series. I want to be a Minnesota fan because this team has looked so good in the past. But here's the thing. In the last 2 weeks, they have won 2 search and destroys. They've won 1 domination. I just don't see a world where they will improve enough to beat this New York team. I've got New York and Chicago getting out of Group B. And although I do think that Toronto LAG could be a good series, it's just one of those things that, like, this is a litmus test for both of them because both of them have made recent changes and both of them have done well in recent changes. Last time they played, it was without Kleenex and it was still a Game 5 at the Minnesota home series. I think with Kleenex, this team has no problem getting past LAG. I mean, the only reason why they really did not get past that series the first time around was because they didn't look super great in the search, but they still were able to be put into the 100-point club by Toronto without Kleenex. So that's one of those things that's like LAG's consistency is still all over the place, but it is kind of a wild card pick, I think, for Toronto because we've only seen them play 3 games. So it's kind of tough to kind of, make the full-on headstrong argument, but I think what I saw, and if they stay with this same 5, pending they don't make another like roster swap for Classic back into the mix, I think that this current Toronto roster has no problem.
Agreed.
Who do you got winning it all?
Oh, I'd love to see Chicago do it. Wins the entire thing.
Wins the entire event.
Oh, man. Atlanta, I think it ends up being, we haven't got it all year, but if it is Atlanta,
Chicago in the finals.
Can you imagine that? I mean,
yeah.
I hope that's what we get because, listen, the scene's been dying to see it. I've been dying to see it. I honestly think that Chicago is going to be able to come back here and they're going to win themselves another event and tie things up against Florida with 3 apiece. It'll be one of the two. It'll be either Atlanta or Chicago for sure. And I think Atlanta's not going to be able to fix their hardpoint issues. So if it does come down to a grand finals against both of those teams, and as long as it doesn't go to a game number 5, like God forbid, I think I think that Chicago will close things out 3-1.
In this, if they were to play today, Chicago wins 3-1. But since it's going to be 3 weeks before we see them play, I think Atlanta fixes their hardpoint. I think Chicago fixes their search. And I think it goes to Game 5 and Atlanta wins in Game 5. That's my take.
Don't say that, Alan. No more Game 5s with Atlanta face. God damn.
The rest of the year, all we're going to get is Game 5s with Atlanta face. This is the way it goes. Let's talk viewer questions. We do have a couple that came through, and I think they're good ones. So let's go ahead and answer those ones up for you guys. Again, we do this every single day after the CDL concludes, and you have a chance to win 5 credits just by submitting your own questions to the CMG thread that gets posted. So make sure you do that. First one that came through, though, was from Luca Puka. What roster change do you think Atlanta FaZe would make if they were to have to make one? I guess the
Ooh.
better way to phrase this is who's the weak link on this Atlanta squad right now?
Is there really? Like, you look at Priesta as someone who maybe had a little bit of a slump, he says, but I think looked a lot more solid this weekend. I think he had a lot of big plays too, like in Search and Destroy in particular. Um, who do you take out?
I can't fathom a world you take any of them out. And the only reason why I say that is because what other options do you have? There's nobody else out there to take. I mean, maybe someone from the amateur scene, but
Yeah,
like
maybe
then
someone from the academy squad, right? I mean, like
well, yeah,
maybe like
but like I don't see Tom coming in and filling a role that any of the current guys fill. I don't see Journey coming in and filling any of the roles that the current guys fill at a better level. If there were to be a player though, I think if there had to be, like if the GM came out and I'm the coach of Atlanta and said you have to make a swap, I feel like Priest is the easy answer to make right now
I
because of
think you're right.
the role that he fills.
Sure.
It's kind of like the same role that like an Awakening has. You know that he was able to step in and fill that role that Mox was kind of leaving empty. And I'm not trying to say that Priest is not filling the role perfectly, but there obviously is. You know, when you were to rank the players, Priest is below some of those players in Florida, and maybe even in Dallas, and maybe even in Chicago. I feel like he would be the guy that you would have to swap.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anyone else. Like if yeah, like you said, if you just had to be one, you can't
Yeah,
take out
gun
Celium.
against my head. You
Yeah,
had to make a
that's
swap,
right. That's
right?
right. Pick one. Pick one. Yeah, I agree. It has to be Priestley. You can't take out Major Maniac. He's been, just like another Skies, I think, in a lot of ways for me, for someone that does a lot of the similar things that he does on the map. And yeah, you can't take out the Tiny Terrace. I mean, they're the Tiny Terrace. Like they're together for a reason, right?
There's
So I
too
mean,
much
you
pop
remove.
off between both of those guys.
That's
You
right. They
can't.
can go off at any
Yeah.
given moment, and you can't take them out of the mix. So I think the easy answer is Priesta for sure. It's the only answer, I guess, probably for me. I think.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, maybe there's some consideration for Major Maniac as the main AR, but again, like,
Mm,
Tom is not fulfilling the AR spot better than Major Maniac is. He might not get the sexiest gunfights in the world, but like the role that he plays on hardpoint on rotations, he does it in a different way than any other AR currently does in the game. And again, you could talk about like how Skies he's able to perform for blocking spawns and doing kind of the same thing. If you ever watch Major Maniac play on maps like Petro and maps like Azir Cave, the role that he fulfills is very much so out of the fight, but huge impacts when it comes down to
yeah.
rotations as a whole. So I don't think you can instantly sub in somebody to make that role more achievable.
Agreed.
Other question: who was the most surprising player at the Paris home series? I think we both have the same answer for that one. And then who was the most to do well? I guess okay. The actual question: who was the most surprising player at the Paris home series to do well, and the most surprising player to underperform? I'm just going to start. Most surprising player to do well has to be Kleenex.
Yeah. I think Kleenex is definitely, I mean, like he had all of those big moments. In particular, I think of that 10 spree that he went on Ramaz up against
To
OG, or
clutch
was
the
it?
map.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
yeah, I'm trying to remember what map it was up against. It was up against New York for map number one on Ramaza, right? Where he went on the 10 spree and it was an electronic shop, I think, and he just was just frying anybody who dare challenges him. Yeah,
Yep.
that was a game-changing moment for Toronto to be able to actually win themselves that map in that set. So I think Kleenex, yeah, I think you bring up a great point, Alan. It's him, or I also put Pharaoh pretty high up on this. I actually think Pharaoh is also someone who's not being talked about, who did have a good event. I think his best event so far, and I think it's one of the two for me. But I think Kleenex more so just simply because Toronto Ultra looked better as an entire squad, and it looked like it was off the addition of adding him.
Yeah, I think that, Pharaoh had a great weekend last weekend, though, too, which is like why he's not super high on my list because he's playing at a high level with Awakening now. But I think as far as surprise, no one knew what Kleenex was going to do.
Yeah, that's a good
And
point.
the fact that he was able to kind of come out and do the exact same thing that he had done at Champs without playing at all, mind you, throughout the
Right.
challenger scene this year, nobody knew. I mean, again, we hear the controversy on Twitter about how there's no pro tens going on anywhere. We don't know how much playtime this guy's getting on the Toronto Black Squadron or whatever their B team scrim is and how much scrims they're actually getting. But he kind of came out and again just showcased that, yeah, I've been on the bench and you've been missing out by not using me. Other side of the coin, biggest underperformer. I part of me wants to say Chino, but that's a lot of weight to put onto one player who's only played in 2 pro weekends so far. And it's
Yeah.
hard for me to really say anybody else from Optic because they haven't really had a storied history of overperforming throughout the year. But I don't
But
know. I
like,
feel like
but when you think of like, I mean, like when you think of the low, like, I mean, like OGLA was certainly the most underperforming team. So like
Without a doubt. And
it almost
everybody on
right.
that team played poorly this weekend.
Yeah, so it's not like it's like an individual per se that was off the back of them losing and not winning series. It really just felt like it was everybody as a whole. But I almost feel like that goes hand in hand for who had the worst performance. I feel like it has to be somebody like on that team, but there's no individual. It's just like everyone just unfortunately played like dog, and there's
Well,
nothing you can really
I'm
take away from it.
I'm looking back through these maps and stat totals, and maybe the easy answer here was actually Dashy.
Did Dashy
He
play
went
that bad?
19 and 24 in the first hard point. Okay, whatever. 2 and 6 on the following search. 10 and 21 on the Dom. This is versus New York. 13 and 28 in the map 4 hard point. And
Oh,
then versus Toronto,
okay.
10 and 22 in the first hard point. Went 5 and 6 to the search. Not bad. 27 and 19 in map number 3, but that was in a losing effort.
Right.
So maybe there is
Maybe
conversation
you
that
are right.
Dashy and Namos, I think at one point in time had said that the weekend prior, like, was one of Dashy's,
Dashy's
or maybe
worst
no,
event.
it was his Friday. That Friday was his worst day of CDL so far, and maybe that's what you look at and to say that, yeah, okay, maybe it is Dashy in total.
Which is crazy because he's the superstar from last year on Optic Gaming, right?
Yeah,
Who's that literally became in a lot of ways the face of the brand for that entire year of Black Ops
Absolutely.
4. So
And I think
it is insane.
when the question is posed is who the most surprising, I think that's what you look at. Again, Optic on my list was
Yeah,
again on the up and up, and then they just get smoked this weekend. I think like it has to be somebody off that Optic team. I guess pick your poison.
yeah, pick your poison. I mean, it's one of them, but yeah, I think just reading the stats from Dashy, who you just would not expect to have this kind of performance. I actually don't think Dashy wants to play on this team anymore. Like there was rumors,
I don't think
that
he ever wanted to
he
play on this
wanted.
team.
I think you're right too. There was rumors after the beginning of the year that he wanted to play in Chicago, and and I mean, like at the back end of it, I mean, not only have they not practiced well since day one when they had Jacob onto the original roster, but they have not gradually improved except for the weekend that they added Chino in, and that just felt like it was just the finally a
Yeah,
refresh, a deep breath of something new, and that didn't end up working out for them for very long, obviously, as you see them get smoked in what was one of the most dominating hard points that we've seen so far in the year.
wild,
So
dude.
tough scenes for them, and where do you go from here? I said that I think that they're just done, unfortunately, for the year, but I mean, who's to say what's going to happen?
It's tough scenes regardless. But that said, this episode went a lot longer than we anticipated as we nearly hit the 1 hour mark.
Oh
So
wow,
thank you guys for tuning in. We got a little bit caught up, even though we had less talking points this time. It just goes to
interesting.
show that we have a lot to say, and maybe that's not for the best. Who knows? We'll find out as we go. We'll say farewell for now. Again, we'll see you guys next time. Next time will be pretty open ended, though, as again, with an extended period of time between now and CDL New York. Maybe we'll come back and do another highlight show somewhere in between now and then. So make sure you stay tuned at CMG_esports on Twitter for more updates on when you can catch the Defuse. And of course, if you're following along on YouTube, make sure you stop by and check us out live on Twitch. Otherwise, if you missed some of the episode on Twitch, go over to YouTube and check out the back part that you weren't able to catch. So until next time, friends, don't let that fuse fizzle out, and have a wonderful rest of your week. So long.